Question their narrative? Let's be honest here. If a so-called fact-checker declares something false even when evidence proves otherwise, is it truly a fact-check? Or just an opinion wrapped in authority? Cut 2. The journalist swallows, hard. A murmur runs through the live audience. Karoline has taken control. The journalist tries to regain her footing. Journalist, attempting to recover. That's a dangerous line of thinking, Karoline. If we start dismissing verified sources, Karoline Leavitt, leaning forward, pressing in. I'm not dismissing verified sources. I'm questioning whether they are truly verified or just selectively endorsed. And that's a distinction your network conveniently ignores. Cut 2. The journalist opens her mouth, but no words come out. She hesitates. A silence falls over the room. The audience senses it. The journalist isn't leading this conversation anymore. Karoline is narrator. Building climax. And just like that, the balance of power shifts. The journalist, once in full control, now finds herself on the defensive. Karoline isn't just holding her ground, she's advancing, exposing the cracks in the mainstream narrative, and turning the tide before millions of viewers. Narrator, building drama. The air crackles with intensity. The journalist, once so sure of herself, now grips her notes a little tighter. The audience watches with bated breath, sensing the shift in power. Karoline Leavitt is no longer on the defensive. She's controlling the narrative, and the journalist is running out of ways to spin it. Journalist, fake composure, strained smile. Well, Ms. Leavitt, it's clear you have a unique perspective, but let's focus on the facts. Karoline, raising an eyebrow, coolly rebutting. Oh, I'd love to, but which facts? The ones selectively framed by your network? Or the ones your producers refuse to air because they don't fit the preferred narrative? Cut 2, the journalist, stiffens. A nervous laugh escapes her lips. The audience murmurs, some in shock, others in quiet agreement. Karoline leans forward slightly, her voice calm but commanding. Karoline, pressing on, eyes locked on journalist. You keep asking me about misinformation, yet your network has pushed false narratives time and time again. Let's talk about that. Flashbacks, montage style. A news anchor confidently reporting a story later proven false. A manipulated clip taken out of context to smear a public figure. The same journalist dismissing legitimate concerns. In a past interview. Cut back to the interview. The journalist is rattled now. She shuffles her notes, looking for a lifeline, but Karoline isn't done. Karoline, smirk, calmly challenging. Why don't we take a moment to let the audience decide who's really pushing misinformation? Cut to the audience. Some nodding. Some whispering. The balance is shifting. Journalist, forced chuckle, attempting to regain control. Well, Ms. Leavitt, Karoline, interrupting strong and assertive. No, let's be clear. You invited me here expecting to corner me, but all you've done is expose your own bias. I came prepared, did you? Narrator, final build-up. The journalist's face flushes. She's losing control. The audience knows it. Karoline knows it. And now it's time for the final blow. Narrator, gravitas heightened tension. This was it. The moment of reckoning. The moment the audience, the world, had been waiting for. Karoline Leavitt, steady as ever, stared down the journalist who had, up until now, controlled the narrative. But not anymore. The tables had turned. Cut 2. The journalist shuffles her notes. The confidence in her voice wavers, just slightly. She knows she's losing control. The crowd senses it too. Karoline Leavitt, leaning forward, deadly calm. You've spent the last 20 minutes pushing a narrative you claim is based on facts. But let's examine your own record, shall we? Cut 2. A giant screen behind them lights up. Headlines appear. Clips of the journalist contradicting herself in past interviews, spreading misinformation, twisting words. The crowd murmurs. Some. Karoline, the journalist's face drains of color. Journalist, stammering on the defensive. I don't see how this is relevant. Karoline Leavitt, slight smirk, ready to strike. Interesting. And would those be the same independent organizations that happen to be funded by political interest groups? Cut 2. A murmur runs through the audience. The journalist tenses. Karoline's words are hitting their mark. Narrator, slow, building drama. The journalist expected an easy victory. But Karoline isn't just responding, she's redirecting, forcing the conversation in a direction the journalist didn't anticipate. The game is shifting. The audience can feel it. And so can the interviewer. Narrator, tension building. The journalist isn't done yet. Losing ground, she leans in harder, voice sharp, her demeanor turning ruthless. She won't let Karoline escape unscathed. She has a reputation to uphold, an agenda to push, and an audience that expects her to dismantle. Conservative guest with ease. Journalist, forceful, aggressive. Ms. Leavitt, you still haven't answered the question. Why do you continue to spread dangerous rhetoric? You do realize the damage misinformation causes, don't you? Cut 2. Karoline takes a slow breath, the flicker of a smirk almost returning. But she holds steady. She sees what's happening. The journalist is doubling down, refusing to lose control. Karoline Leavitt, steady, unfazed. I find it fascinating that you're so concerned with misinformation, yet your network has been caught misrepresenting facts time and time again. Would you like me to list examples? Cut 2. The journalist's face tightens, a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes before she masks it with condescension. Journalist, dismissive, interrupting. That's a classic deflection tactic. We're talking about your claims, Ms. Leavitt. Are you saying you have no accountability? Narrator, intensifying drama. The interruptions come faster now, the journalist cutting Karoline off at every turn, refusing to let her finish a sentence. The goal is clear. Fluster her, make her stumble, make her look weak before millions of viewers. Cut 2. Karoline grips the arms of her chair subtly, her jaw tightening just enough to show she's had enough. The game is clear, and now it's time to change the rules. Karoline Leavitt, eyes locked, commanding presence. If you'd let me finish a single thought, I'd be happy to answer. But I see what you're doing. This is the classic media strategy. Interrupt, distort, control the narrative. Cut 2. The journalist forces a laugh, shaking her head, but the audience is catching on. The online comment section is already buzzing, with people calling out her tactics. Narrator, building to a climax. The power dynamic is shifting. But the journalist, blinded by arrogance, refuses to see it. She pushes forward, determined to get the last word. What she doesn't know? Karoline is just getting started. Narrator, grim, dramatic tone. The tide is turning, but not in Karoline's favor. The journalist, sensing an opportunity, leans in closer, pressing her advantage. The air in the studio thickens, anticipation crackling like static electricity. Karoline remains calm, but the trap is closing in. Journalist, voice dripping with mock concern. So, Ms. Leavitt, if you truly stand by your statements, why did 3 major news organizations just fact-check your claims and label them as dangerously misleading? Are you telling us they're all wrong? Cut 2, the audience murmurs. The journalist's allies in the media world flash their breaking news banners, ready to declare a victory before the fight is even over. Karoline Leavitt, measured, but aware of the trap. I would be careful about trusting fact-checkers who often have their own biases. But I see what you're doing. You're trying to make me defend myself against a label instead of debating the actual issue. Journalist, smirk widens, going for the kill. Oh, so now you're saying the media, the very institutions tasked with reporting the truth, are all conspiring against you? That's quite the conspiracy theory. Cut 2. Karoline remains poised, but the audience is watching closely, some starting to doubt. The journalist's words are designed to make her look paranoid, unreasonable. The host glances toward the producer, off-screen, who gives a subtle nod, It's time for the pre-arranged expert panel. Cut 2. A large screen behind them flickers to life. 3 panelists, smug and rehearsed, are brought in via satellite feed, each one an expert handpicked to reinforce the journalist's narrative. Expert 1, condescendingly shaking head. I mean, let's be honest. This kind of rhetoric is dangerous. It emboldens people who refuse to accept facts. Expert 2, chuckling, looking into camera. This is classic political deflection. When someone can't defend their claims, they attack the credibility of those who challenge them. Expert 3, grave tone, as if speaking of a national crisis. And it's not just misinformation, it's deliberate. This is how democracy erodes. Cut. To Karoline's expression hardens. This was a setup from the beginning. She knew she'd be outnumbered, but this was something else. The journalist turns back to her, wearing the triumphant look of someone who thinks they've just buried their opponent. Journalist, leaning back, arms crossed, fake sympathy. Well, there you have it, Ms. Leavitt. It seems the experts agree. Care to respond? Narrator, building the tension to a peak. The moment of humiliation. The moment where Karoline Leavitt is supposed to crumble under the weight of media pressure, where she's supposed to stammer, to fold, to admit defeat. But does she? Narrator. Dramatic build-up. Just when it seems like the journalist has Karoline cornered, a revelation sends shockwaves through the room. The smug expression on the journalist's face falters ever so slightly, but Karoline notices. She's been waiting for this exact moment. Cut 2. The journalist, gripping her pen a little too tightly, throws out another accusatory question. Journalist. Forcing a smile, pressing on. You claim to stand for truth and transparency, but isn't it true that you've been misleading the public on key issues? Our research shows. Karoline Leavitt, interrupting, voice steady. Your research? You mean the conveniently edited reports selectively framed to fit a narrative? Let's talk about real transparency. Cut 2. Karoline leans forward slightly. The journalist shifts in her seat. The tension is palpable. Karoline Leavitt, contied, exposing the truth. You see, what the audience doesn't know is that you personally have been behind multiple retractions for false reports, ones you never publicly acknowledged. In fact, let's pull up an example. Cut 2. A large screen in the studio lights up. Headlines appear, exposing past inaccuracies and misreporting directly tied to the journalist's name. The audience gasps. The journalist's face turns pale. She stammers, trying to regain control. Journalist, nervous chuckle, attempting damage. Control. Well, I wouldn't call those false reports. They were Karoline Leavitt, relentless, delivering the final blow. Oh, but your own network did. And they issued quiet retractions days later, hoping no one would notice. But we did. The people did. Cut 2. The audience murmurs, nodding in agreement. The journalist, once so sure of her control, suddenly looks like the one under interrogation. The tables have turned. Narrator. Final beat of the scene. The hidden truth is out. The power has shifted. And for the first time, the journalist is at a loss for words. But Karoline isn't finished yet. Not even close. Narrator. Tension building, dramatic. The atmosphere in the studio is changing. The smug confidence on the journalist's face falters just slightly, but enough for Karoline to see. The audience leans in, sensing the shift. The power dynamic that had once tilted heavily in favor of the journalist is beginning to crack. Cut 2. Karoline maintains her composed demeanor. Her eyes locked onto the journalist like a hunter who has just spotted their prey. She knows she has struck a nerve. Karoline Leavitt, steady, assertive. You claim fact-checkers have debunked my statements, but isn't it true that these fact-checkers are often funded by the very organizations that benefit from suppressing opposing views? Cut 2. The journalist's smirk tightens. She wasn't expecting this level of pushback. A slight hesitation, barely noticeable, but there. The viewers see it. More importantly, Karoline sees it. Journalist, defensive, attempting control. Well, Ms. Leavitt, those organizations are reputable, respected sources of truth. Karoline Leavitt, interrupting firmly. Respected by whom? By the same media establishment that ridicules anyone who dares to. Narrator, intense cinematic tone. The cameras are rolling. The studio lights burn bright. The tension in the air is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sitting across from her, the so-called seasoned journalist smirks, convinced she's about to expose a conservative firebrand, someone she believes is out of her depth. But what she doesn't realize is that Karoline Leavitt isn't just another talking head, she's a force of nature. Cut to a high-profile political debate setting, a news studio with modern glass panels, a bright red and blue backdrop, and a sleek desk separating the interviewer from her guest. The crowd, both in the studio and those watching from home, is expecting another one-sided takedown of a conservative guest. Journalist, leaning forward, predatory smirk. Ms. Leavitt, I'll ask you again. Why do you continue to push misinformation when fact-checkers have repeatedly debunked your claims? Isn't it irresponsible for someone in your position? Cut to Karoline Leavitt, composed, a small smile playing at her lips. She expected this. She prepared for this. The audience doesn't see her pulse steady, her mind sharp as a blade, calculating, her response with precision. Karoline Leavitt, controlled, coolly confident. Well, that's an interesting question. But let's talk about facts, shall we? Cut to. The journalist stiffens, sensing the shift, the audience leaning in as Karoline takes the offensive. Narrator, building suspense. What happens next? The interview takes a turn no one saw coming. The journalist thought she was setting a trap, but she had no idea she was the one about to fall in. The stage is set. The battle is about to begin. And by the time it's over, only one person will be left standing. Narrator, steady, cinematic tone. The interviewer, emboldened by her position, leans in. This isn't just an interview. It's an ambush. The audience expects a slaughter, Karoline. Being pushed into a corner with nowhere to run. But they don't know what's coming. Not yet. Journalist, forcing a smile, digging in. You see, Ms. Leavitt, we live in a time where dangerous rhetoric leads to real-world consequences. So, I have to ask, how do you justify spreading conspiracy theories? Cut to. A subtle murmur in the studio audience. The bait is set. The implication is clear. Karoline is reckless, irresponsible, a threat. The journalist leans back, confident that her framing will make Karoline stumble. Cut to Karoline, unshaken. She tilts her head slightly, eyes flickering with amusement. Karoline. Leavitt, measured, unfazed. Dangerous rhetoric. That's an interesting phrase. Could you clarify which statements you're referring to? Cut to. The journalist, momentarily caught off guard, recovers quickly. Journalist, smug, waving hand dismissively. Oh, we don't need to play coy. Your past statements on election integrity, immigration, and certain, let's say, controversial policies have been widely criticized. You've been fact-checked numerous times. Cut to. Karoline remains calm, her smile never wavering. The audience shifts, waiting to see how she'll react. Narrator, building tension. The balance of power in the room is clear. The interviewer holds the microphone, the platform, the carefully prepared questions designed to push Karoline into a corner. But there's something she doesn't understand yet. Karoline isn't playing defense. She's letting the journalist dig her own grave. Karoline Leavitt, leaning in, voice even. Fact-checked, you say? By whom exactly? Cut to. The journalist falters, just slightly. It's barely perceptible, but Karoline catches it. She's setting the trap now, turning the conversation onto the very media establishment that assumes control. Journalist, tightening her grip on the pen, pushing forward. Well, independent organizations, journalistic watchdogs, experts. Karoline Leavitt, unyielding. Oh, but it is. You demand accountability but refuse to hold yourself to the same standard. You call yourself a journalist yet engage in selective reporting. Cut to, the crowd erupts. The tide has shifted. The journalist looks around, realizing the safety net she once relied on is gone. The producers in the control room hesitate. Do they cut the feed? But it's too late. The truth is out. Narrator. Satisfaction, justice served. Poetic justice. The very tactics she used against so many others had been turned against her. Live. Unedited. Inescapable. Cut to, the journalist exposed, struggling to regain control but failing. Karoline Leavitt victorious, standing firm, unshaken. Narrator. Grave, reflective tone. The studio is silent. The once smirking journalist sits frozen, her face drained of color, as Karoline Leavitt leans back, victorious. The audience, those in the studio, those watching from home, know they've just witnessed a complete dismantling. But this isn't just about one interview. The ripples are already spreading. Cut to, a montage of headlines flashing across the screen. Karoline Leavitt. Shreds liberal reporter's narrative live on air. Journalist exposed for bias, social media reacts. The downfall of a media gatekeeper? Cut to, the journalist's superiors, stiff-faced in an emergency meeting. Corporate damage control. Sponsors pulling ads. Executives whispering behind closed doors. She had gone too far. The network cannot afford the backlash. Cut to, a breaking news alert. The journalist, once a respected name, is now the story. A forced leave of absence. Official statements. Re-evaluating our journalistic integrity. Cut to Karoline Leavitt standing outside the studio, the press swarming. But she isn't rattled. She isn't boastful. Just composed, dignified. She's already looking ahead, to the next battle, the next fight for truth. Karoline Leavitt. 2. Reporters firm but graceful. Accountability matters. I hope this serves as a reminder to everyone in the media. Facts should always come before agenda. Narrator, closing, powerful tone. And with that, she walks away. Not just from a debate, but from a victory that will be remembered. Because when the truth speaks, loud, clear, undeniable, justice always follows. Narrator, grave, yet hopeful. And so, the dust settles. The interview that was meant to break Karoline Leavitt did the exact opposite. She didn't just hold her ground. She dismantled every misleading narrative thrown her way. The journalist, once so sure of her dominance, now sits speechless. Her attempts to control the conversation reduced to an embarrassing spectacle of bias and bad faith. Cut to. Clips of the interview go viral. Headlines emerge. Karoline Leavitt, school's liberal journalist on live TV. Social media erupts. People who had never considered her perspective before begin to question what they've been told. Karoline Leavitt, final words, strong yet calm. This isn't about left or right. It's about truth, and the American people deserve better than one-sided narratives. Narrator, reflective, thought-provoking. The power of the moment isn't just in the words spoken. It's in the realization spreading across the audience. The realization that truth, when spoken fearlessly, has the ability to cut through the noise no matter how loud the opposition.